Today we're going to talk about the test cross. And a test cross is a cross or mating between an organism of unknown genotype and an organism that has a genotype that's homozygous recessive for some character. So let's go ahead and talk about a pea plant. We talked about that when we talked about our monohybrid cross. So what if I had a tall pea plant? Let me write that down. I have a tall pea plant. Now if I had that tall pea plant here, you would not be able to tell the exact genotype of that tall pea plant. It could be capital D, or the genotype could be capital D, lowercase d. Both of those genotypes would code for a tall pea plant. So how do we know what the genotype is? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to cross this tall pea plant with a pea plant that's homozygous recessive for height. So let's go ahead and work that through, and then when we work through this example, we're going to recap at the end, and we'll talk about how we know what the genotype is. So, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the parental generation, like we did before. Parental generation, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write phenotype. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tall pea plant that has the unknown genotype, and I'm going to cross it with a dwarf pea plant. Now I'm going to go ahead and write genotype. Now I know what the genotype of the dwarf pea plant is. It has to be lowercase d, lowercase d. But the tall pea plant could be homozygous dominant, or it could be heterozygous. How do I know which one? Well, I'm going to work both cases through. So I'm going to start by writing capital D here. Now, over here, I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to write the other case. So what if I had a tall pea plant, that's my unknown genotype, and I cross that with a dwarf. Now for my genotype, let's assume that this tall pea plant, instead of being capital D, let's assume that it's heterozygous, capital D, lowercase d. And again, my dwarf pea plant must be lowercase. Now I'm going to go ahead and write gamete. Figure out my gametes. This tall pea plant could give a gamete a capital D, or it could give a gamete a capital D. Same thing here. This dwarf pea plant could give this lowercase d, or it could give this lowercase d to a gamete. Now let's go ahead and do this case over here. This tall pea plant could give capital D to a gamete, or it could give a lowercase d to a gamete. And the dwarf could give a lowercase d, or it could give a lowercase d. It can only give what it's got. Now, let's go ahead and draw two Punnett squares, one for each case here. I'm going to put my capital D's here, one here, and my lowercase. Let's go ahead and work this through. Capital D, lowercase, capital D, lowercase, capital D, lowercase, capital D, lowercase. Let's go ahead and do the same thing over here. Draw my Punnett square. Put my gametes on the side, so capital D, lowercase d, and then lowercase d, lowercase d. Now I say, what if this gamete containing this capital D got together with this gamete containing a lowercase d? The genotype of the offspring would be capital D, lowercase, capital D, lowercase, lowercase, and lowercase. Let's go ahead and summarize our results. So these are going to be the F1s, and I got genotype, so I'm going to start with genotype. Now here, my genotype, 100% of my genotypes are going to be heterozygous, capital D, lowercase. And in terms of phenotype, 100% are going to be tall, because the capital D for tallness is dominant to the lowercase d for dwarf. So 100% of my offspring are going to be tall in this particular case. Let's go ahead and summarize this Punnett square. We'll start with genotypes again. And my genotypes are going to be 50% are going to be heterozygous, or 2 out of 4 are going to be heterozygous. So capital D, lowercase. And then 50%, or 2 out of 4, are going to be homozygous recessive. Now when I write my phenotype here, this 50% is going to give me a tall pea plant. So 50% are going to be tall, and then this 50% are going to be dwarf. So what does this actually tell me? Well, it tells me this. If I take that tall pea plant that I didn't know the genotype of, there it is. I'm trying to figure out the genotype of that tall pea plant. And when I made it with a dwarf pea plant, and then I take those F1 seeds, and I plant those seeds, if all the seeds come up tall, I know that that tall pea plant must have had this genotype. If I plant all those seeds, and the pea plants end up being 50% tall and 50% dwarf, I know the genotype of that tall pea plant must have been heterozygous. And that's how we're going to use a test cross to figure out what the unknown genotype of an organism is. Now remember, we're just figuring out the genotype for a particular character, not the genotype for everything. Just a particular character. In this case, our character was height. And that's going to be it for test cross.